Again. All right. So welcome to Thursday, 8th of August, AU Core Technical Design Group meeting. I'm going to go through what we're going to cover off today. For those of you who are joining us, and we do get people continue to come in and join the technical design group. My name is Danielle Tavares-Rickson. I'm an AU Core co-chair. And so I am chairing the meeting today, and Jamie will be taking the minutes for us. And so going through our agenda today, which we talked about last week, which was talking a lot around ballot, some of the logistics and planning for that. Before that, we'll do what we always do, which is our usual business, basically going through any updates and news, approval of minutes, and then talking about the work group day and connectathon. And then, depending on how we go with that, actually do some walkthrough of the AU Core IG, the one that has just come out for ballot, which we published on the 5th of August, which is the Monday of this week, basically. So we'll go through that, and I think that's actually part of our updates. Oh, it is. So in terms of some of the updates and news, before we get to approval of minutes, because I think we've still got people kind of trickling in. First up, I guess, ballot snapshots have been published. That is the case for all the active FHIR projects. So AU Base, AU Core and AU requesting were all published on the 5th of August. They're all about to go through ballot. And to my knowledge, for all of those specs, all agreed changes have been incorporated. I mean, they absolutely are for cool. And so they're published in the NPM registry. So they're fully there, they're downloadable, you can start playing with them. The other update is around report back to the CDG, where during one of our recent meetings on AU CDI R1 reconciliation, it was raised and that we should do a report back really to the CDG on where we've got to, and actually do that in the CDG meeting. And so that's now happening. The next clinical design group meeting is on the 13th of August, and Marvin, who is another AU Core co-chair, will be doing a 10-15 minute report back to the clinical design group on behalf of the AU Core TDG on where are we essentially in R1? What have we achieved? What's the relationship between AU Core and AU CDI? Okay, so our other usual business is approval of minutes. So I'll just go to those now. These were sent out for review. Any of the notes that have been supplied to me have been addressed. So as far as I'm aware, there's no outstanding pieces of feedback. But does anyone need more time to review these before we go through approval of them? I'll just scroll down. Okay, I'm not hearing any requests for additional time. So I would like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes. Is someone happy to motion?
I'll motion, Marvin.
Thanks, Marvin. Is someone happy to second?
I'm happy to second, Daniel here.
Thanks, Daniel. So now I'll go through and put up our poll to approve the meeting minutes. For those of you where this is your first time, you're about to see an electronic poll launched. We do this at the beginning of every meeting, and it's going to come through now and ask for you to select an option on your screen for affirmative, negative, or abstain. If this is your first meeting, absolutely feel free to abstain here. And we'll just let that voting come through. It looks like we have just a couple more people who are still voting now. All right, I'll end that poll. That's everyone voted. I'll share the results. So there are 21 people who have voted affirmative, 0 negative, and 15 have abstained. So that motion is carried. The minutes are now approved. Thank you. Now that's intended to be the last bit of voting we do today. Today is more, I think, talking through ballot. What happens now? You know, we've done all this work. We've put together a draft specification. We've gone through ballot for comment reconciliation, and we've proposed essentially what we think is the first release of AU Core, and that's now up for ballot. What does that mean? What do we have to do as a technical design group? So that's a lot of what today is going to be, along with talking through the logistics of our next meeting in the connectathon. And then if we have time, I'd like to actually walk through the AU Core IG that we have put out for ballot and what's in it, how does it work, what are the cool things that we managed to put in through reconciliation of our last ballot. So, I've got one more piece of update here. So we're still getting people coming through, which is amazing because testing hasn't closed for AU Core, doing more product submissions, and more people are coming on as testing partners of AU Core. A whole number of organisations came to the last AU Core Sparked testing event in Melbourne, where we had a number of really fantastic conversations. And so far, I think we've got the results from 16 unique products have submitted some testing results for coverage at this stage. Lots more forms have been submitted, but and we encourage that people are going through development and testing, and so they're submitting test results over that process over time. So there's still a few more to come in, and obviously we have the connectathon coming up. And I probably should have also said the test coverage matrix, what that means in terms of our coverage, where have we essentially completed a necessary coverage testing for Core and start to go through the results, which systems have tested what parts of Core. That's on the table for our next meeting. So that's August 20th, where we'll start to go through that and what does it mean that we need to then report back to the FHIR work group, who is our governing group. So let's talk through ballot logistics. Now, I'll admit here, I'm not going to be monitoring the chat. So if there's a question you've got, it'd be really, really helpful if you could pop your hand up, or if other people online could answer it, because I'm on my laptop today, so I only have one screen. It's not very big, so I won't have the chat open. But do feel free to pop questions in the chat anyway, and other people can answer them, or again, just put your hand up using Zoom reactions. I'd like this one to be a little bit more open and conversational, where if there's anything that I'm about to go through that you want more information on or would like to have a discussion on, feel free to raise your hand at any time. So let's talk about balloting, because that is about to be the focus of our activity, is our participation in this balloting process. So the HL7 Australia balloting. Balloting, yes, it's the formal process that HL7 uses to take a particular standard, through the standard development process, form a consensus body, get feedback and authorization for publication of a draft standard. There's rules governing how HL7 Australia ballot works. They're primarily defined in 4 documents. By the way, these slides are already on the minutes, so you can go grab them now if you're keen, or come back later. They're already there. So there's the Governance and Operations Manual. That's a big document. That's HL7 International. It governs everything we do. And then we localize in Australia through our affiliate localization. And so there's the HL7AU process for balloting. That's on Confluence. We have our decision-making practices, and we use those all the time. We just use them to approve the minutes. And also the HL7AU bylaws have material in them around balloting, like voting eligibility in terms of membership. So what we've just put out is a ballot for working standard. In March, we went through a ballot for comment. And in fact, e-requesting is about to go through a ballot for comment. And there are different levels of ballot. So the lowest one is for comment, essentially. That is where a group wants to put forward a specification and go out and get some direction and feedback on a particular draft in order to drive what the rest of the work really should be, provide some direction there and work through that. We've done that in March and got some really, really good feedback that we've folded now into R1, and we think we now have our R1 draft out, and we've put that out for working standard. So working standard is also known as standard for trial use, and this is used where we are intending to say that this is a set of material that we think is ready to implement. This is ready for people to go out and test and exercise in a real world so that we can evolve that before it gets locked down and becomes normative, which is why it's called the working standard. And you will see a number of evolutions. R1 is a working standard. We'll probably see R2, R3, and so forth also be working standards as we continue to work through and get more implementation experience across different use cases for parts of AU Core. It's also a ballot for a working standard, goes through a consensus body, which is HL7 Australia, for authorization to publish as a working standard. And it gives it also is used to indicate that this content is expected to eventually be binding on implementers. Are there any questions about sort of the level of balloting and maybe the difference between what we did in ballot for comment and working standard yet? All right, let's keep going through it. So you'll have seen this if you've been coming to our meetings. What's our timeframes for this ballot for working standard? So ballot for sign-up period, and that's closed now. That ran for a month. That's the forming of the consensus body. So that's all HL7 Australia members are given an invitation to ballot the standard, and that is the same for all of the ballots that come out, whether that's FHIR or V2. There is an invitation to be part of the ballot, and all HL7 Australia members are eligible. And then we go through the ballot period, where balloters are essentially reviewing the content and providing their voting. And then we have ballot reconciliation. That's where a lot of the action happens for us in the technical design group, and then publication. And I've got some slides that'll go through how does that happen and how are we involved in those phases. But let's talk about just this one here. So now that ballot sign up is closed, we have some numbers. So in total, 77 voters have registered to vote on AU Core. And that's made up of 18 individual members of HL7 Australia. And it also comes from 19 different organisations as well. So that's our pool, essentially, of our consensus body. What else have I got here? Okay, so let's talk about what actually happens. So I'm going to be taking some frequent sips because I think I'm losing my voice. So during the ballot period, balloters are reviewing the specification. We have proposed essentially to HL7 Australia that there is a draft, a proposed standard here that we think should be published. And now the consensus body, those balloters who have signed up, will go through and review that and see whether or not they are comfortable for AU Core R1 as proposed to be published. As they go through, they might raise feedback. They might raise feedback that forms part of the ballot comments, but they might just be raising feedback and not mark it with a vote. And they are going to vote on whether or not AU Core R1 should proceed to publication. I'll show you what the votes look like in a second, so that when we get that information, we can interpret what it means about what we'd proposed. And I've just got a bullet point here to say your feedback can be voted on. So balloters can vote on specific pieces of feedback, and they don't have to have raised it themselves. In fact, we don't want them to go through and duplicate. We don't want people to duplicate. We want people to be assessing if an issue is already raised and then voting on that already raised issue if it exists. So I would encourage people to continue to put in specification feedback during this period, and of course, any time at which you want to communicate where something needs clarification, or maybe where it's too restrictive, or maybe where you think that we should be considering a future item for inclusion in Core. Please raise that as feedback. So after the balloters have essentially completed that during the ballot period, that comes on to ballot reconciliation, and there's some responsibilities related to that. Now, co-chairs need to triage all the ballot comments raised, and they'll start actually before the ballot period is closed. And all the administrative burden, really, of balloting falls basically on the co-chairs. So they need to go through and triage. They need to propose dispositions, as in prepare what is called a preliminary reconciliation package, go into a bit more detail on those things. And the TDG members need to be voting on the dispositions. And that essentially brings us to reconciliation. Once we've made a decision, once we've voted on all the items on whether or not a change is going to be made in AU Core R1, or whether or not we're saying, no, that's actually a backlog item, or in fact, we don't think a change should be made. At the end of that, that's reconciliation complete. And HL7 Australia will contact the balloters to go through a process called withdrawing votes in JIRA. That's where we get that closed loop, where all the balloters who have voted on specific pieces of feedback to say, I think this needs to be changed, can choose to withdraw, which is in JIRA, and they go through and they click the button for withdraw, which indicates that they accept the resolution. So that's where we can get the feedback on whether or not the balloter is happy with the decision that we've made, or they're not. When all of that happens, we then confirm if it's passed, as in, do we have authorization? And there's rules on that, and I'll go through those as well. So I wanted to step into voting, but probably again, before I do, any sort of questions on what I've just run through about that? All right. Let's talk about voting. So the balloters will go through, and when the ballot pool is set up, so someone signed up, everyone starts with a no vote. So they're recorded in JIRA and they start with no vote. And if they, for whatever reason, are unable to record a different vote, then they stay as a no vote, as in they didn't cast a vote. And that doesn't count towards like ballot quorum. It doesn't count to whether or not passing or failing. The next is abstain. And that happens at an overall level where a balloter can cast their vote to say, I abstain. And that's interpreted as the balloter has in fact taken part in some balloting activities. They have at least reviewed it, or at least some part of it, but aren't yet able to make a statement that whether or not they think it should be approved or not. And then they can choose to abstain. And again, that doesn't count as to whether something passes or fails. What counts as to whether or not it passes or fails, and by passes, I mean we have the authorization to publish AU Core 1 as a working standard, is affirmative and negative. Affirmative can happen overall, where a balloter might just say, I am happy, I'm comfortable with AU Core R1 as proposed to proceed through to publication, and I'm not going to choose to provide any feedback, any more specific feedback. We might also, though, get affirmative votes on specific items of feedback. So someone might review, I'm going to be doing this, by the way, And as I go through, I might pick up some things and say, look, I think that this should be addressed in R1, but overall, I don't think it's sufficient to actually block publication of AU Core R1. So that's what affirmative means when people are voting on specific items of feedback. They're indicating they think a change should happen, but the issue is not sufficient to prevent publication of the standards. And then we get to the negative comments. So that can only be on specific items of feedback. You can't just say negative and not say what, because the idea here of negative is for balloters to be able to identify where there are any specific issues that need to be addressed before AU Core R1 can be published. So they're quite important. And we look at those. I mean, we look at all of them, but they also count in terms where if a balloter has any negative, has voted negative on any feedback items, overall, their vote is counted as negative. And that's where we get to later on in the process, the technical design group having reviewed and made a determination on whether or not they will make any changes, for the balloters to then come back and choose to indicate they are satisfied with that resolution, and their vote may then turn into affirmative because they feel that that comment has been sufficiently addressed and they're now comfortable for R1 to be published. So that's how that overall votes means. And when it comes to us as a technical design group, we're going to be looking at things that are affirmative and negative, because the no votes and the abstains aren't on specific things that we need to look at addressing. So let's go through the next step. The co-chair triage. For AU Core, there's 5 of us. There's myself, there's Marvin from Telstra. We have Tim, who is now with the Australian Digital Health Agency. We have Andrew from Epic, and we have Landon from Best Practice. They're the current set of AU Core co-chairs. And so we'll go through and look at all submitted ballot comments. I very much hope it's not as many as last time. There were 199 in the previous one, which was expected though, because it's a ballot for comment. So you expect a significant set there. And we need to go through and go, well, what's typographical? What's a technical correction? What's a substantive change request? And importantly, what's out of scope? And we'll talk about that in a bit more detail. And then, except for the things that are out of scope, we need to group things and look at what we think might be persuasive or persuasive with modification. What should be backlogged? Where do we think a change shouldn't be made? And that's part of what happens during the co-chair triage. In terms of out of scope, there's also in scope where issues might move in to our area. So I'll deal with out of scope first. So we might see issues that have been raised as part of the AU Core ballot, but in fact, the source of the issue is in a different artifact. And those for us will be our upstream things. So AU base, the HL7AU templates, which is a intermediate artifact that does colors and styling and all that sort of thing for IGs. Or it might be the FHIR specification. We treat those a little differently. If it's a HL7AU item, and it's viewed to be out of scope, the AU Core co-chairs will pass that on to the co-chairs responsible for the other one. So for AU base, for example, the AU Core co-chairs have to, within the first couple of weeks of ballot closing, send an email to the FHIR workgroup co-chairs and go, here's all the issues that were raised during the core one, but we think they're base. And then those FHIR workgroup co-chairs will also then do their triage. If they accept it, we move those issues over. So it's not like the issues aren't addressed. They just get moved to being part of AU base's ballot. And they can also choose not to accept them and say, no, we think this is a core problem, not a base problem. We might get into meetings on it. Who knows? It's a bit different for the fire spec. If someone raises something, I'll pick something really obvious. So let's say someone raised a comment on AU Core organization and said that they could see that in the XML and the JSON, organization is written with a Z, not an S, and we're Australian, so we should have Australian spelling. If you're familiar with the organization resource in FHIR, you will know that it's defined by the FHIR standard, and there's no possible way to address that within the AU Core specification. It's part of the technical definition of FHIR. So in that case, that is viewed as out of scope, and we would close that with non-persuasive, but what we would be doing is documenting in there why, as in the fact that this is viewed to be related to the FHIR standard. We would also provide the information on how to raise that on the FHIR specification, because it's important that people's feedback can be directed to the right area. And I know I've written FHIR spec there, but it might be other places, like someone might raise something about a SNOMED preferred term. Again, that's not something that a change in AU Core can affect. That item needs to be addressed in SNOMED rather than Core. And then, of course, we have the reverse, because we now have a downstream IG, which is AU e-requesting. So there might be items raised in the e-requesting ballot that are actually Core problems. So we would expect that the AU e-requesting co-chairs are doing triage, and they will be letting us know, the Core co-chairs, which items they think are actually need to be moved into our ballot. And so that's part of that scope determination that happens. So one of the things I was talking about here is about classifying things that are raised as to whether or not they're technical corrections, questions, answers, etc. And that really has an impact on whether or not they need to be resolved, and whether or not they need to be resolved through the technical design group. So these are the 4 issue types from when someone raises a comment or specification feedback in JIRA. These are the 4 kinds of things they can be. And I'll start at the bottom. So comment, and the reason it's grayed out is those don't come through voting for the technical design group. That is just commentary. Like it says there's an example, great job on the spec. We had one of those for AU Core, for the AU Core ballot for comment, that was positive about what was in the material. That's nice. We don't have to do anything with it. Then there's questions. They can be raised as questions, or as part of the co-chair triage, we might actually identify that something that was raised as a technical correction or change request is actually a question. And that's where the person who's raised it is actually looking for an answer or clarification, rather than trying to propose a change to AU Core. Again, those don't get voted on. Typically, they can just be responded to by the co-chairs, but it may be worth bringing that to a discussion, and so it might come to a technical design group meeting, but we don't have to essentially resolve them as part of ballot reconciliation in that way. Then we have technical corrections. So these are your obvious errors. Anything that sometimes they're just editorial or typographical. There's some examples there about spelling, grammar, and sometimes they're still typographical, but they might be normative, where, for example, maybe the search parameter name is incorrect, or something else that is incredibly obvious. Because they're technical corrections, if they're viewed as actually being a technical correction, they're automatically approved. We don't need to vote on those. And then we have everything else, which is actually a request to change AU Core, not just an obvious defect, but a request. And that can be things like enhancements, or it can be saying, let's take out this invariant, like we did, I think, in our last meeting, to remove that, or change the terminology, or all sorts of things. And all of those absolutely have to come through the technical design group, and we need to vote on them. Basically, that's the key part really of ballot reconciliation, is discussing and agreeing on the change requests. Which ones do we address now before we publish R1? And then of those, which ones are we, like, what is the change that we're actually going to make? How am I doing for time? I might skip past this one. It's a bit boring. We can look at that later. So let's get to the technical design group. So at a really high level, the technical design group members vote on how ballot issues are resolved, basically. So the balloters vote on what items they think, if any, need to be resolved before we publish R1. And that all comes to us as the technical design group to make a decision on what changes, if any, are made before we publish R1. So usually, again, there's a preliminary disposition package supplied by the co-chairs. So we've gone through and reviewed things. We might suggest that something is considered for future use and why. And all of that information is then provided to TDG members with at least a week's notice, preferably two, to review that, to review the comment that was raised in the first place, to review any suggested disposition that the co-chairs have put together. And review is not just read, it can also be then coming back and saying, no, I think you've missed something here, or this is incorrect, or we need to have a meeting on this. And the other responsibility then is, to attend conference calls and other meetings, and then to vote on the dispositions. So that's the responsibilities of technical design group members through this reconciliation period. So there's going to be quite a lot asked of people to be reviewing all the items that have come through that are change requests during this ballot period. They will all come to all the people likely on this call and others who haven't made it today to go through review and participate in our decision making about what do we do about it. And that decision making will happen in a couple of ways. One, there'll be the meetings like we've been holding where we'll present items. Someone who has raised the particular ballot comment may come along and present themselves, depending on whether it's a complex issue or they really want to. Or we might do block votes in electronic form. So we might put out an electronic vote and ask people asynchronously to review this and then decide on whether they approve it or not. That is almost guaranteed for things that are like typographical and commas and so forth. We don't want to take up conference call time to like run through every comma or other editorial item that people have noted. So that is essentially what happens during the reconciliation period. Probably just going to stop here because this is, I think, the most TDG member slide. Are there any questions on what I've just run through there on what you might need to be doing over the next, couple of months? All right, I'll keep going, but pop your hand up anytime. Okay, during that period, there's admin stuff the co-chairs have to do. We have to set up the meetings, make sure you've got all the electronic votes, make sure you've got all the material you need, make sure we've got the right people at the meeting. In ballot comments, people can say, I want to be there in person, and we need to invite them, and make sure that when we are actually having those meetings and decisions, that all of that is documented properly. It's all run in accordance with the governance rules, and we keep the JIRA workflow kind of going and up to date. So that's the stuff the co-chairs need to do before, during, and after all of those disposition kind of voting. All right, so let's go ahead with making, what are the decisions we're actually going to make? I keep saying this word disposition. Yes, that's all very nice, but what are the decisions we're going to have to make about any change request? Here's what they are. So we're going to go through, and I actually expect quite a lot of this first one. Consider for future use. This is a ballot for R1, and AU Core, as are really all fire standards, they're evolving standards when we're never really going to stop, probably. We're just going to keep going. But a certain part, we have put together a snapshot, a baseline of what we think R1 is, and additional work, especially work that we want to take through use case workshops, any development, and then testing and piloting. That's all R2 space. So we're going to get a number of items that are raised that we need to go through and make the determination if this is something that has to be addressed now, or if it goes into our backlog for R2. If we think it's R2 or some other backlog, we'll make the decision that this is considered for future use, which actually doesn't put off the decision for very long. R2 is coming as soon as we've finished reconciliation. We'll be doing the scoping. So that is expected really to be maybe end of November, beginning December workshops on looking at our backlog and what are we going to pick up and start to work on for R2. So after that possible option and consider for future use, if we actually think that, no, this is something that we should be addressing in R1, then we have a couple of options there. There's persuasive and persuasive with modification. Persuasive is, I mean, as the description says, it's basically an as is. We agree to make the change. It is basically what the proposed change was. That's persuasive. And it says we're going to make a change to AU Core R1. The next one, persuasive with mod, says that, yes, we're going to make a change, but the change we've agreed to AU Core is noticeably different. Sometimes that's because we've identified that not only does this one artifact change, but in fact, there's 3 or 4 other things that need to actually align with that. And so that's when we might tag something with persuasive with mod. It's not the only reason, but it's a really common one. And then the last couple that we might vote on are where we are not persuasive and not persuasive with mod. So not persuasive is essentially that the technical design group has made the decision that no change is going to be made to this specification. Classic examples of that are the ones I called out on where something is part of the fire spec. There's no way to change that in AU Core. That's one reason. And then sometimes it's because we don't agree that a change should be made. Like the overall feeling or the voting from the technical design group is that we will not make that change that was proposed. And then finally, we come to the trickier one, which is not persuasive with modification. As a sort of pedantic person, I really like this option where someone has raised a change request. The work group, the technical design group has assessed it. And although we don't agree with the reason or really the issue raised, we're still going to make a change to AU Core. Often that is because we've looked at this and gone, well, we're not actually going to change what you've proposed, but we're going to include now a clarification that maybe justifies or explains better why the spec is the way it is. That would be not persuasive with modification. They're the decisions that we're going to have to make, essentially, on every change request that comes through. We're going to need to come to an agreement on one of these resolution dispositions. I'm going to skip past block vote. We don't need to talk about it. Anything else more interesting on withdrawal? Not really. I think I've covered that. Pass or fail. Let's talk about pass or fail. Aha. So here's what we're going for. We are a working standard and we have put this out. And so we want to, at the end of this, after the withdrawal of votes, that period has passed, determine whether or not we have the authorization to publish. And so we'll look at this, and then for working standard, the rules from HL7 are 60%. And by 60%, that means 60% affirmative votes. Noting we're only counting affirmative and negative. We're not counting no vote, and we don't count abstain. So if 60% of between the affirmative and negative votes is affirmative, we have the authorization to publish AU Core R1. And that's what we're looking for. If we don't have that, then we need to go through an assessment and look at what additional significant changes, substantive ones, are needed for an R1 baseline, and look at whether or not we do another ballot cycle for that. There are some rules behind the scenes, and if we need to, I'll present those to the group so we can make a decision, but let's just assume we won't need to for now. Oh, right, example of that. I just wanted to show you the numbers for AU Core. So when we did the ballot for comment, remembering, of course, that ballot for comment, I'll come back, sorry, is there's no pass fail. The point of ballot for comment is to elicit feedback, not to declare you have a standard that you want published, basically. So, and that's what e-requesting is about to do. They're putting out a series of material where they want to get comment and direction from the wider community. So it's not about passing or failing. Can we publish e-requesting R1? And that was what we did with Core back in March. And so these were the numbers we got when we went through Core. You'll see here across all of those kinds of votes I was talking about. So initially on the left, where it says eligible, 78 people signed up to be a voter. And if I go right to the right on the end, 43 ended up not casting a vote. 4 individuals abstained. And then from the initial comments that came through, when that came to the TDG to go through and start reconciliation, there were only 3 affirmative and 28 negative. Then we went through ballot reconciliation, and there was after withdrawing the negative votes, what we've seen the numbers change to now is that there are 24 affirmative and 7 negative recorded in JIRA. I'll sort of note here that we've had some HL7 JIRA tooling issues. So there are some that have stayed negative because due to the tooling issue, they were unable to withdraw their particular vote on that item. We're working through that with HL7 International, and we think it's fixed. But we'll continue to work with them closely to make sure that all of the JIRA tooling works. Now, you can see all of this, guys. So all of the HL7 balloting, all the comments that get raised, who's voting, how does it all happen, is publicly available. And so you can, go through and have a look at this. And we'll be recording all of our comments, all of our dispositions, all of that will also be publicly available and part of the JIRA. Which nicely brings me to, we have an area now where we're going to be doing our work in Confluence for our ballot. I'll just click on that. So it's pretty empty at the moment because the ballot period is just starting. So there's an area in Confluence called ballot reconciliation. If I go up to that parent page, and this will always track all the ballots. So there's the ballot for comment that we went through, and all the information about it is there. And we've set one up for the ballot for working standards. And this will always have what votes are coming up, what is completed, and some summary stats as we go through. It will also importantly have the AU Core co-chair triage. Again, everything is public and open. So as things get triaged or assessed out of scope and why, all of that content will be available in Confluence. I think I've come to the end of what I wanted to say about ballot, which went for a while. Any questions about that? Are we all, oh yeah, I kind of know what's going to happen? All right, let's see how we do then when we actually get to it. And so that brings me to talking about work group meeting on the 20th of August and connectathon also in August. So here's our next meetings. So we've got the 20th of August. That's part of the HL7AU working group meeting day, which is for face-to-face folks. That's in Brisbane. And for those of you who want to join virtually, you can, obviously. It's all open. And the agenda for that one is to do some planning, really, to do planning around overall timeframes with ballot reconciliation, with doing R2 planning, and to also get into the AU Core testing report back, which will feed into planning for our next steps. And then if we have time, let's take a first look at ballot issues, because by that point, ballot will have been open for a couple of weeks. So we'll already have some stuff coming through. So it'll be good to start to get a sense of what the scope and what the size of what we would need to work through for reconciliation is. Following that is connectathon immediately. So that's 21st, 22nd, again, Brisbane. And we have an AU Core track there. And then we've got our next fortnightly meetings, 5th of September, and then we've got 19th of September, and we're now in ballot reconciliation by this point, basically. So prior to the 5th of September, you should see a preliminary reconciliation package coming out for making some voting decisions that we'll then go through on the 5th of September. That's the plan. I'll note on this top right here, 16th of August. So today's discussion or presentation on what happens in ballot was targeted towards, I guess, more co-chairs and technical design group members, and less about what do you do when you're a balloter? How do you actually do things in JIRA? How do you create comments? How do you vote on something? That is going to be covered in the information session in that blue cloud. So that's 16th of August, which is Friday. I think that's next Friday, 12 to 1. There's the link there. Everyone is welcome to go if you're curious, to go along. How does it all work? What does it look like in JIRA? But I don't think any specific invites will come out to folks. I'm not sure. Brett, what's the intention there?
I think the email has a sign up attached to it. So I think, yeah, you'll need to sign up for that.
For the participant information session?
Oh.
Yeah, I was talking about the info session on the 16th of August.
I have the wrong meeting. So, yep. So, yeah, I think you should just be able to join that one.
All right.
But, yeah, cool.
All right. Sounds good. So I'm going to cover just this bit on signups. Registration's been open for a while. I've still got the tiny URL down the bottom on where you go to see all HL7 events and get tickets. But I'm going to note here that Connectathon is fully booked out now. If you want to attend, then email events@hl7.com.au and let them know that you would like to go on the waiting list for the August Connectathon. There are always people who, for some reason, are unable to attend on the day, and so hopefully they will let HL7 know, so that then HL7AU can go and look at the waiting list and assign a ticket to someone from the waiting list, basically. From the work group day, there are 60 who are registered to attend, and there's 10 places remaining. Now, if you're planning to come in person, please register. If you're just planning to attend virtually, or you think you might, you don't need to fill out the ticket. You can just join the link, no problems. It's just keeping an idea, I think, really on overall numbers that we, from a face-to-face perspective, that we're looking for that information. All right, I'll move on. And let's talk about the actual work group meeting day. So it's a day for all the work groups under HL7AU to go through and to meet and given a face-to-face venue. But what it doesn't mean that we're going to have a whole day AU Core meeting. We're trying to stagger them as much as possible so that people who are interested in either being there face-to-face or who are interested to dial in can actually go to all the sessions if they want to. In terms of the agenda, and I links off to those, but there's also a tiny URL up here on the right for that page on where the agenda and all the information is. The start of the day for those people who are face-to-face is 8:30. That's a registration. That's the in-person stuff. You don't need to, and in fact, don't join online at 8:30. That's too early. No one will be there. The first session kicks off at 9 o'clock in the morning, and Brett, with his HL7AU hat on, will be doing a sort of a 15-minute orientation on work groups, how do they run, how do they work, and decision making to give some information for people, especially those who are newer, on what's going to happen throughout the day. I highly recommend it. So if you're going to join for AU Core, noting we're first up, although our session starts at 9:15, I'd recommend you dial in at 8:55. That way you'll also get the work group orientation, and that'll go straight in. It's the same invite for the AU Core one. Now, the dial-in details, we don't have them available yet. I'll be sending out meeting invites to people when I've been given the dial-in details from HL7 Australia. So, you know, that will come. We'll also make sure the dial-in details are in the usual spots, which are in confluence on the agenda for the meeting. So there's already an agenda there, and also on the calendar. So for those of you who might not know, there is a calendar which has all the information always on when meetings are happening, where are they happening, what's the particular dial-in details, be they Zoom links or something else. So that will always be there. In fact, what have I said for Core? Whoops, I need to change that because that says Zoom. All right. Minutes, can we have an action on me to just remove the dial-in details on the calendar on the 20th? Oh, remove the Zoom dial-in details from the 20th.
Yep, noted. Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie. Where was I? Okay. So if you're coming in person, you will want to come to George Street. You'll want to go to level 4. It opens out into a nice open area, and you'll see the registration desk, and we'll direct you where to go from there, like which room we're in. And if you're dialing in, prefer 8:55, but otherwise you can just join at 9:15. There's morning tea then at 10:45. So theoretically we should finish at 10:45, but we are able to continue going on if there's something that we are still discussing. And we're also able, since we're in a separate room and with a separate dial-in, if we really need to work through that topic, to continue into the next session. I don't think it'll happen, but we are able to do so. That would be decided by the technical design group on the day if we're going to actually continue discussing something on this day rather than moving it to the next meeting. The e-requesting folks then start at 11:15, and they go for 2 sessions. They can continue through the next one as far as I know as well, like us. And then there's the firework group in the afternoon at 3:15 to 4:30. It's got some exciting governance topics it's going to go through. And then that brings the work group meeting day to a close at 4:30. After that is a co-chair meeting, which starts to happen at HL7AU work group meeting days where all the co-chairs get together and do some of the overall governance kind of discussions and prep meeting and admin around that. So that's the work group meeting day. We're not planning to meet as AU Core before this again. So are there any questions that people have about our next AU Core TDG meeting before we close today? Okay, no worries. If you have a question later or you're concerned about something, you can contact me in Zulip or any of the co-chairs, and also post some questions on the agendas on this Confluence page, or just send me an email. No problem. I'll get back to you on it. So let's talk about connectathon. So advising, there's a connectathon happening, so that'll be going through AU Core. And this is an in-person day. This is not hybrid. None of the connectathons or really any of the testing events are hybrid. This is always in person. It's a 2-day event. We'll be going through a number of test scenarios around validation, around exchanging resources, and we've got a whole number of people signed up for that, which is going to be really interesting. And also for those people who are coming who aren't necessarily bringing a product to test, but who maybe want to have a discussion about they're building a downstream IG or trying to implement AU Core and want to discuss that, or trying to discuss how to map requirements of AU Core onto their own local data models. And day 2 is much the same. It's 2 days of basically having discussions, talking with each other and connecting. We're all in the same room with the e-requesting folks too, which is good. So I'm going to note here, it is an in-person day, but if you want to do some testing through public endpoints / provide a public endpoint, and you're not planning to come in person, then you can actually be doing testing during the AU Core track. So what that would look like if you're either a client app maybe, and you want to test during the 21st and 22nd of August or connect to some of the public connectathon endpoints, noting that often during the connectathon period, some things are made available that aren't otherwise available outside of connectathon. And again, if you are a server, as in an AU Core responder, and you're interested to make available an endpoint for connectathon participants, or you want to test using Inferno during that period of time, then that's good. That's great. That's fine. Please do so. How you get involved if you're not a connectathon registered is you come to the AU Core testing Zulip channel. That's the one. And there's the tiny URL there. And let us know in this Zulip channel that you actually want to do this, that you want to make something available or use something in that period of time. And you might want to come to the track kickoff call. I'll go through that in a sec. And maybe check out the AU Core track page, which has all the information on what is available. And if you are going to be a server, you will want to post some information on there. And if you are going to be a client, you're going to be using some of those public endpoints that are available on the AU Core track page. So let me just get into when is the track kickoff, actually. So that's tomorrow. 12 o'clock, 12 to 1, we're doing a track kickoff for AU Core, which we'll walk through what's going to happen, what are the test scenarios, what information will be available. In the chat. So there we go. Okay. So that, I guess, comes to the end of, unless there are any other questions about what our next kind of set of meetings are. And I was going to run through what is in AU Core now. What did we just put out for ballot? What are we asking people to go through and assess as to whether or not they're comfortable for this to proceed to publication as a working standard? But before I do, are there any other topics that people think we need to go through today before I finish off with that walkthrough? All right. So just start going through ballot. Okay, so they all kind of look the same immediately. Like they all have the same kind of homepage, content, and there's a note to balloters that you'll see on the front of all of these. So what we've got now is we start with the homepage. That has all your general information about the project background, and it has information on how to read the guide, basically. So bit of an introduction, where have we come from? It calls out the specific dependency versions for us. So our ballot is dependent on AU base ballot, of course, because we are a set of constraints on top of AU base. And we are on Smart App Launch 210 and IPA 100. Noting IPA is going to have something new soon, I think, going to ballot, which is exciting, because that addresses a number of things we raised that we've identified through the AU Core work, where we thought IPA needed to make changes, and they have accepted that. And they have made them, and that will be published as part of the new version of IPA. So that's quite exciting. So yeah, we're coming down. We see the overall bit of information on the AU Core RESTful interactions. This is a ballot for comment change where we've added this content, and information on all the parts of the AU Core IG and what they do. What's in our guidance? What are we saying about security and privacy? What are the different kinds of FHIR artifacts we have? Examples, and then information on support, which is really about downloads, the artifacts that you can get and how you can use them, and also the license and legal that HL7AU has provided. And finally, one of the big differences between our original version and the changelog, and this version, sorry, is the changelog, where we've identified all the substantive changes and significant updates we have made between the version that last went out to ballot and this proposed R1 working standard. And so you'll go through and you'll see all the different FHIR JIRA trackers where we've had feedback from items, what was voted on. You can click on all of these to go find out what meeting was it discussed at, what was the actual vote decision taken, and I guess there's quite a lot actually to read through. We made a huge amount of work we got through in between when we published our initial draft for comment and what we're taking through into R1. So, I mean, the technical design group and the members here and those people coming to Connectathon and the testing events have done a really fantastic job in terms of working through a number of items for a core digital health and administrative data and how we have data access to that and what some of the security and privacy requirements are. So let's get to conformance then. So overall in this section, it talks about if you're interested in conformance, there's two different ways to implement core and the conformance requirements that are associated with those two different ways. This section saw some substantial refinement during the ballot for comment, particularly on wording for the profile-only support. But when we get to the profile support plus interaction, which is talking about not just the data requirements, but also the necessary RESTful API interactions to support as part of AU Core, then that has introduced what we call obligations and has gone through and defined those and really, I think, clarified what we meant by requirements to support core, requirements to implement core. So this comes down, it has a bit of information on the different conformance artifacts, what do profiles do, the fact that there are capability statements. And so in AU Core, we have requester and responder, because the first release of AU Core focuses on data access, basically. So for a number of our key digital health, so like allergies, some stuff around medications, around procedures, around problems, we've defined a minimum set of information that we want to be able to support and the means by which we can exchange that through a data access API. And then we go on to describe profile only support, which is a legitimate use case where a product essentially is a set of FHIR data, but it is not exposing a RESTful API. And that's where profile only support comes in. And then there's the profile support plus interaction support, which has all your reads and your searches, etc. We don't yet have any requirements around create and update or delete, because again, R1 is just focusing on that high priority target of exchange. But I expect those things will come in the future of future releases of AU Core. And then the rest of this content where we talk about mandatory elements, there's nothing new here. There's no additional requirements really in Core. This is more explaining how to interpret when something is mandatory and how to identify that something is mandatory in a profile. And we also explain must support and obligation from a FHIR sense and how that is implemented in AU Core and what is expected of different systems who are trying to implement AU Core. The rest of the conformance section is guidance, I think, on how to spot something as must support and how to interpret them. There's all sorts of different kinds of data elements. Some have terminology, some don't, some are different data types, and there's guidance with examples on what do we actually mean by these must support and obligation with an example of each type. I'll just keep scrolling down. And then we have our rules on missing data and suppressed data. And these are conformance requirements. They apply across profile only, and they apply across profile plus interaction support that state what you are required to do in different circumstances in order to support requirements where a system does not have a particular data element. Or in the case of suppressed data, where a system does not have the authorization rights to access a particular piece of data. That's what's on the conformance page. So I invite people who expect to be implementing AU Core to look through this very carefully. This is the set of conformance requirements accompanying the rest of R1. And we are proposing that this is at working standard level. I'm not going to go too far into guidance. There's a number of different sections that are referenced off different profiles, things in particular around medicine. There's a section here called AU Core Data for Interoperability. This section identifies the AU CDI release we're looking at and what is the relationship between AU CDI and AU Core by mapping across into profiles and into data elements, and also identifying where in fact something is a future candidate requirement, but we don't yet have support defined in R1. Other things that's worth looking at, we've got a bit more detail on relationships with other IGs. That's an informative section. We have a statement that is required by all HL7 AU IGs on whether or not we conform to AU base. And we do. We're compliant with that. And we also have these two sections that I think are worthwhile just having a quick look at. Part of what we are intending to do is harmonise with international efforts. And so 3 of the specifications in particular we've looked at in Core are IPA, or International Patient Access, IPS, International Patient Summary, and US Core. And so this content was in 0 in our previous ballot for comment, but it has been improved, I think, substantially in terms of clarity and graphics. And it's also been updated to the latest version of US Core to identify where, if you are compliant to a profile in AU Core, do you satisfy all the necessary profile requirements in another specification, basically? Or, which is the yellow tick, would you need to look at some additional code changes to fully satisfy what this spec is? So we see in allergy intolerance that if you satisfy AU Core allergy intolerance, you satisfy the profile in IPA and you satisfy the US Core profile. But there may be additional requirements in IPS. And that information on additional requirements is below the table. That's US Core. The example I think we were looking at was IPS. Here we go. So then we see for each of those profiles, we see what element the additional requirement might be on and what that additional requirement is. So that's an improvement from how this was laid out previously. We also have the section now on future of AU Core, which talks about our development cycle, but also calls out a number of things where we've made decisions that these are not in scope of R1 and are starting to sort of build out a backlog here. The security and privacy section defines all the conformance requirements that have been agreed to date on security and privacy. So we have some shoulds, but we also have some shalls here. In particular, this one on using TLS version 1.2 or higher for data exchange. Okay, so fire artifacts. AU Core has profiles defined in it and references extensions. We've got some search parameter profiles, and then we reference out to terminology, and we have capability statements and actor definitions. So if you go to the profiles and extensions page, you will see all the profiles defined in AU Core. And as we go through that list, that's essentially in alphabetical order, roughly. And then we come to the extension section. This section is not the extensions defined in AU Core, because we don't. We reference existing extensions. And so what this is identifying extensions that are marked with must support. So we have 2. They are both in AU Core patient, and they are to support pronouns and gender identity. They're must support. So that's the linkage to them here. If you want to look at the particular requirements on the data for any particular resource type and have a look at the profile then, and that sets out those minimum expectations of which elements are required to be supported. What terminology do you have to use? What are the rules on usage for the data? What extensions do you have to support? And it also provides some guidance. So above that, above the profile will be guidance on how to implement the profile. And then there will be the profile view. And you generally should be looking at the key elements table to get the full set of requirements. The differential only looks at those requirements applied in Core on top of what we inherit. And Core builds on top of AU base, which you can see here. There's AU base allergy intolerance. So to see the full set of things an implementer should pay attention to, you should look at the key elements table, which starts to build out a view there. Now you can see the terminology, and you couldn't see the terminology binding beforehand. And you couldn't see that because Core has not changed the terminology binding. So it wasn't viewed as a difference. But you would need to know what those rules are in order to implement this. So always have a look at the key elements table. And so each of the elements marked with must support forms part of the minimum expectations and has conformance rules on it, as defined in that conformance section. And these are those obligations there that are called out in the conformance table with the different actors we've defined, a responder and a requester. At the bottom of each of these tables, you will see then what is the list of terminology bindings. You will also see the list of constraints. Most of these are inherited from the FHIR standard. In fact, actually all of these are inherited from the FHIR standard. So you wouldn't see these in the differential view, but we can see them now that I clicked on the key elements view. Coming down below this is some support information on search. So there's an overview for this particular profile on the different individual parameters and the combinations thereof, along with conformance expectations and further requirements. These requirements apply when it's used alone or in combination. And by that, what we mean is whenever the patient parameter is used, either just as patient or implemented as patient plus clinical status, these rules here apply. And then there's some examples really of what does that look like. And so you'll see that for every profile. We'll have that format and layout. So I won't look at another profile. What I'll skip to are search parameters. These are profiles, as in we have not defined any new search parameters in AU Core. What we have done is pulled out explicitly in a profile of search parameter where we have chained identifier support. So this is a profile of the clinical patient search parameter. And really its point is to identify that the chain allowed is identifier. So patient.identifier. That's what those do. You will see that anyway if you look at the capability statements. So the capability statement defines what are the necessary capabilities, including the profiles, the resources, the RESTful operations, and the search parameters that you need to be supporting if you are going to be a requester or if you're going to be a responder. And it calls out things like what is the format you have to support, what implementation guides do you have to support, provide some overall statements, as well as talking about any system-wide interactions. Noting these are just may. So that's completely an individual choice. There's a number of requirements called out in AU Core as may, simply to highlight their relevance to implementers, but you do not have to implement them. There's then a summary table for all the resource types, what the profile associated with it is, whether with what kind of, read, search, update, create is supported, what the search parameters that are supported are. And there's also includes, which you can't see until, here we go. Medication request says that you need to support the include of medication. I think we also have one on practitioner role. Yep, there it is. And to get the detailed information about what that means, you might then see for each of these, you might click on practitioner, for example. This will give us this information. So how we read this is for a practitioner resource, you should support it. So you don't have to. Your product may not have any practitioner information. There's no expectation you're required to support it then. I'll note though that if you do, there is a rule down here that says that if the requester supports the practitioner resource, that you shall support the AU Core profile and these conformance requirements in order to still be considered an AU Core requester. So we come across to profile conformance, that's shall there because you shall support this. If you support this resource, you shall support this profile. We have the interaction summary, which says you shall support read and you shall support search. And you may do these other things. That's up to you. there is some, then I went to that documentation, which then provides additional conformance requirements, including noting that and so there's some server information here, simply so that requesters, who are client apps, can also understand what the expectations on the servers are when they're just at this particular page. But if a server supports only the practitioner resource, then they shall provide some guidance on how to access things like provider location and contact information, only using the practitioner instead of practitioner role, because that is our preferred resource for getting that information, which is practitioner role. And then there's the search information here. That's what the capability statements do. They outline for all the different resources, system interactions, and conformance requirements. I skipped over terminology. Oops. We don't define terminology in AU Core. We require support for it. And so what we've listed here is all the terminology that is bound as preferred or greater to a supported element or a supported slice or an extension. So this is all the terminology that can be considered to have must support requirements on it in AU Core. So we've got the value sets and the code systems. And it identifies in alphabetical order all the value sets and what is the profile where it's used. And it also identifies where is it published. Is it published in AU Base? Is it published in the FHIR standard? Or is it published in NCTS? And that's essentially what this page does. Active definitions, I'll just pop to really quickly. These are an artifact and they just summarize what was on the conformance page and say, look, you need to be implementing the requester capability statement. That's what this does. It enables us to declare obligations in profiles. So you should see no differences here in terms of requirements between what is defined on the conformance page and this section. They are meant to work together. All right, so that's all the normative stuff, basically. Let's get to what else we have. We've got examples. So every profile has in a example, at least one. And they are, again, presented in alphabetical order. So you can go through and look at these. I'll also note that there are additional test data available in this repository. So there's a link off there. That's always well worth going to. If you're looking at testing something, that's where you want to go to. That'll have a whole bunch of stuff with a nice README as well that explains how everything works. I want to call out a couple of improvements that have been made to this page since this was last seen in previous ballot. And what we do is we list all the different resource types that have examples here. But you'll note now there's extensions. Because we have must support for some extensions in AU Core, we have identified which examples show those particular extensions, whether they're must support or in this case where we've profiled in AU Core an extension to support sex assigned at birth. We also have examples that demonstrate the missing data requirements and demonstrate suppressed data requirements. So they're linked down here as well, so you can go have a look at what those look like. The support page, got our downloads now. This has been worked on through refinement. We've seen some additional sections come in where people have identified maybe parts of the package that were downloaded that weren't as clear to them. So things around the consolidated CSV and Excel file have come in. But otherwise, I mean, all of this is auto-generated. It's the set of things that you can get a discrete download for that you might want to use in order to do validation or testing, or if you're a BA, go through a set of content. That's what the CSV and Excel file is for. Licensed and legal. So this is the overarching set of licensing and copyright statements that apply to this implementation guide. This is maintained through HL7 Australia, who provides us with the advice on what the required licensing and legal is based on our content. All right, and we've already sort of seen the change log. This will also have another entry after we finish ballot and release 100 between the ballot version and what gets published. And that's it. That's the AU Core IG. Any questions on that? Thanks very much, everyone. And again, having gone through all that content, I remain impressed at the amount of work that this technical design group has really taken through and really made decisions on and pushed through in terms of the testing, the development, our checking, looking through terminology. This is a really, really good draft that we're proposing out here now. So thank you very much to everybody who's coming to these meetings and is a part of this. Great work, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, I think we're going to bring the meeting to a close now because we've run through the agenda for today and we've talked about when our next meeting is. So I'm going to stop sharing. If you've got any comments or questions that you need to go through before our next meeting, again, you can email me, get me on chat.fhir.org or comment on a Confluence page. And otherwise, I'll see you or hear you at least on the 20th of August. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Danielle.
Thank you.
Thanks, Danielle. Thank you very much.